Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. My guest at this time is Democratic presidential candidate Tom Steyer. He joins me to discuss Tuesday night's final debate before the voting in Iowa in early February. He is also here to make his case to be the nominee and answer some of the arguments against his candidacy. And Tom, thanks very much for being with us.
Greg, it's a pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
Well, we'll certainly get to the politics and the policy in just a moment, but the question which you may have already been asked a lot since last night, and a lot of people want me to get the answer to, is what Warren and Sanders said to each other after the debate while you were standing next to them. Was it a continuation of the accusation from Senator Warren or something else?
You know, Greg, I went over to say goodnight to two senators who were on the debate stage with me last night, and I shook their hand and said goodnight, and that I really didn't hear anything. I don't have anything to report. I was still thinking at that point about, talking about what was important and how to beat Donald Trump on the economy. That's what I was focused on, and I didn't hear anything juicy.
Okay. Well, let's talk about another aspect of the debate. Some people made mention of the fact that you took time to agree with your candidates, which in a debate is always noteworthy, especially Senator Sanders and Senator Warren at different times. Earlier on in this campaign, you decided not to join. Later, obviously, you decided you did want to get into this race. Why? Was it something that you thought you could provide that all the other candidates in this race couldn't? What ultimately made you change your mind here?
Look, I believe that we have a broken government. I believe it's been bought by corporations. And I believe that if we're going to get any or all of the progressive policy things that people want, we're going to have to take back that government. And I didn't hear people talking about that. I'm an outsider. I spent 10 years in politics putting together coalitions of American citizens to take on and beat the corporations who bought our government. I've taken on oil companies and beat them on clean energy. I've taken on tobacco companies and passed a $2 a pack cigarette tax and given the money to Medi-Cal, which is the health care for the lowest income Californians. I've closed a $1 billion corporate tax loophole and given it to the public schools. I spent a decade taking on those corporations and beating them and building grassroots, one of the biggest grassroots organizations in the United States, Next Gen America. So yes, I'm the only outsider in this race who's willing to take on the corporations. I'm the only person who will talk about term limits, Greg. 12 years for Congress people and senators. So that's one thing I wasn't seeing. There was no one from the outside who was willing to take on break the corporate stranglehold on our government. Secondly, I'm the only person who's running for president, who will say that climate is his or her number one priority. I said I'd declare a state of emergency on day one, that I'd do it from the standpoint of environmental justice, the black and brown communities where you cannot breathe without getting asthma or drink the tap water without getting sick, but also that climate is our chance to create millions of good-paying union jobs across this country, to rebuild America on an accelerated basis. So that's different from everybody else. And lastly, I have a different experience from the people on that stage. I built a business from scratch over 30 years. We know Mr. Trump's going to be running on the economy. I can go on the debate stage with him and show that he was a fake as a business person and a failed business person, and that he's a terrible steward of the American economy for the American people. I'm different from everybody else on that stage. I really am, Greg, and that's why I'm running.
Let's talk about a couple of things you just mentioned, starting with your focus on the environmental agenda and addressing the climate change issue. How different is your idea for addressing it different than, say, the Green New Deal? And what is your answer to those who specifically say if you go after the fossil fuels industry and try to essentially eliminate it by 2030 or even 2050, that ultimately the renewables are not going to be in a position to replace them in time, and so either you're going to have sky-high energy prices for people who can't afford it, or perhaps even some rolling blackouts?
Here's what I'd say, Greg. The people who say that don't know what they're talking about. I have been working on this for over a decade. As I said, I have fought and beat oil companies about clean energy. I have fought to prevent the Keystone Pipeline and to prevent the last fossil fuel plant that I think will ever be proposed in California was in Oxnard in a low-income Latino neighborhood. I know that not only do we have to do this, but I know that we can do it, that actually clean energy is cheaper than fossil fuel energy. Part of this is Americans are smart. Clean energy is cheaper now in most of America than fossil fuel, and it will be cheaper everywhere, and we can do this. But I also know that every time people have been saying that it's either going to be jobs, job creation, or a safe environment is absolutely a false framework, and I proved that years ago. What I know is if we move to clean energy, I declare a state of emergency, we will be creating millions of good-paying union jobs across this country. The idea of the fossil fuel industry, that they're helping anyone but themselves, is not true. We have to do this. We definitely can do this, and we can do it in a way that makes us healthier, more just, have cheaper energy, and be richer.
So, real quickly, as a follow-up, you believe that renewables can match the amount of energy that fossil fuels are currently providing?
I don't think there's any doubt about it, Greg. We have the ability right now with the technology we have to do it. And you know something? Over the next 20 years, the technology is going to get better every single year. Americans are smart. We have to do this, but we also can do it. You know, it's so funny. The people who are fighting us said for years, it's not true, we don't need to do it. And now they're saying, yeah, we need to do it, but we can't do it. The truth is this. We have to do it. We can do it. And we can do it in a way that makes us much richer. Look, I've studied it for decades. I'm a business person. That's the reason I can beat Trump is I can take him on the economy. I actually have the facts on this as a result of working on it for a long time. People will use scare tactics just the way Mr. Trump does. But the actual fact of this is we need to do this. And don't sell America short. Don't think we can't do stuff. This is our chance to rebuild this country. This is also our chance, Greg, to reinvent this country. We're going to have to lead the world on this. We're going to have to go back to being the can-do country that stands up for what's right and leads the world on moral, economic, financial, and technological grounds. Look, that's who we are. That's the country we are, and that's the country we have to go back to. And this is actually our chance to do it.
Two quick questions in our remaining time. I wish I could get into how to get the whole world on the same page with that, but let's get into foreign policy real quick. The first topic was Iran and why each candidate would be the best commander-in-chief. You pointed to your business career and your work with international folks all over the world. What specifically about that experience prepares you for the job?
Look, I think that I understand how America interacts with countries around the world. And I think that that understanding is much broader than what Washington, D.C. likes to focus on, which is purely military thinking. In fact, that kind of thinking, if you think back over the last 20 years, has been a disaster. In fact, I keep saying what really counts here is judgment, not experience. Because if you look at who's had the best judgment, one of them was a state senator from Illinois who was against the Iraq war named Barack Obama, who turned out to be right. And another of them was the only person in the Congress or the Senate who voted against those really broad powers that we're now so regretting that were given to George Bush, and that was an African-American congresswoman from Oakland, California, named Barbara Lee. We need somebody, I believe strongly, who's not going to fall into the conventional Washington thinking on this, because we need a new framework in thinking about how we think about our relationships with the rest of the world. And I think that the idea that we've been pursuing of bilateral aggression and a move way too soon, in my mind, to military power has been a complete flop over the last 20 years. And you can look back and see it's been very costly for American lives of American service people. It's been very costly in every way for the people of the United States. And that, in fact, what President Obama did in negotiating with our allies against Iran to get them to give up their nuclear ambitions is exactly the model of what we should be doing, completely different from what Mr. Trump has done, completely different from the history, most of the history of the last 20 years.
Last 30 seconds. I see you're in double digits now in South Carolina and Nevada. What do you think is responsible for that?
Message, Greg, it's all about telling people are getting down to the short strokes of who can win, who can beat Trump. It's me. He's running on the economy. I know more about economics than anybody else in that state because I've worked in it in business for decades. People are understanding if we have to beat him, it's going to have to be someone who can go toe-to-toe on the economy and take down Trump, and it's Tom Steyer.
Tom, thank you for your time today. I'll let you get back to the trail. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg. Nice to talk to you.
You bet, sir. Tom Steyer, Democratic presidential candidate. I'm Greg Corombos, reporting for Radio America.